International Relation and Diplomacy TU मा असिस्टेन्ट प्रोफेसरको भूमिका निभाइराख्नुभएकी अपेक्षा शाह हुनुहुन्छ उहाँलाई यो कुराकानी अगाडि बढाइदिनका लागि म हार्दिक अनुरोध गर्दछु
Thank you so much. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to our session on geopolitical turbulence. The discussion will focus on the increasing geopolitical pressures in South Asia. While the China-India rivalry shapes the subcontinent's geopolitics to a large extent, extra-regional actors, particularly the United States, have played pivotal roles. At the same time, smaller states have having to manage and navigate big power rivalries in recent years. In times of geopolitical competition, major powers are also required to allocate significant time and resources to develop and sustain relationships with smaller powers. And the larger states have explicitly outlined their policies in this regard. For India, it is its neighborhood first policy. For China, it is its Belt and Road Initiative. And for the United States, the Indo-Pacific strategy has been the driving force behind its foreign policy in the region. Thus, South Asia presents an interesting cross-section among major powers. In light of this, we will try to comprehend how the geopolitics is unfolding in the region and what future holds for Nepal and other smaller states. For the discussion today, we are joined by Dr. Professor Khadga, Rector of Tribhuvan University. He is also the founding coordinator of Department of International Relations and Diplomacy, Tribhuvan University. We also have with us Ms. Suhasini Haider, diplomatic editor of The Hindu, Mr. Michael Kugelman, director of South Asia Institute at the Wilson Center, and Mr. Wang Peng, research fellow at the Institute of State Governance, HUST, China. I would like to express my gratitude to all of our speakers for their time and participation today. So the session will last for about 60 minutes. As you can see, the time is already ticking. And after that, we'll open the floor for question and answers from the crowd. Right, so my first question goes out to Ms. Haider. Ma'am, what can we anticipate from the new Trump administration in terms of India-US relations? And what consequences can it have on South Asia?
Thanks so much, Apekshya, and thank you to Kantipur for inviting me here. It's such a pleasure to be in Kathmandu. And yes, this is a very interesting week. We're just about, over a week since this big election in the US. And I honestly think if you look at the second decade or the third decade of the 21st century, this is going to be the third big event for the world with geopolitical consequences, and I'll explain that. I think to begin with, we had, of course, the COVID pandemic that disrupted so many supply chains and so many relations around the world, and so much movement around the world. In Nepal, in India, which really count on tourism revenues, count on remittances, this has been a big blow. The second came from the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022. And we saw the kind of impact that had in terms of energy security, food security, fertilizer security. We've had Indians and Nepalis going and joining the war. In fact, that has had an impact on our societies as well. I think, and I'm not overdoing I'm not overreacting, I hope, but I do think that the election of Mr. Trump at this time, as Trump 2.0, is likely to have a similar kind of impact, particularly on trade around the world. And it will affect us in India, it will affect us in South Asia. This is not Trump 1.0, where he himself did not expect to win. This is one where you can see within a week he's announced most of his top cabinet posts. As of this morning, we woke up and we saw the entire list. Secretary of State's been announced, Director National Intelligence been announced, NSA, Chief of Staffs, every Secretary of Defense have all been announced now. So we should expect that they will hit the floor running and they will have a consistent message on moving manufacturing back to the US. So that's going to be one big thing to watch out for. I think when you ask about India in particular, a lot of cause for relief. I know in New Delhi, many had hoped that he would in fact win because there'll be relief on Russia, for example, no pressure when it comes to sanctions and India's relationship with Russia. There'll be a hope that he will be able to bring about some peace in the Middle East at whatever cost that is, because India is looking forward to this India-Middle East Europe economic corridor, and that requires stability in West Asia or the Middle East. I think there is a hope that Mr. Trump, as he was before, is going to have less interest in issues like democracy. Mr. Biden, of course, had this whole democracy exercise and conferences and all. We're not likely to hear from Mr. Trump when it comes to issues on democracy, when it comes to issues on minority rights, human rights, press freedoms, NGOs, and that sort of thing in general. I don't know how many of you have been following the case of Indian agents being accused of being involved in an assassination attempt in the US. That is also something that New Delhi thinks will now calm down. But I think where I made the point, I think on trade, on technology, what we're expected to see is Mr. Trump is much more transactional. He will want India to cut tariffs. He will want India to increase its investments in the US. I think we all woke up with a tweet from Mr. Gautam Adani saying, welcome to Mr. Trump, and here's how much I plan to invest in the US in the next few years. So, making that point straight away, it's obvious that Indian Inc., as well as the Indian government, is feeling that kind of pressure. And finally, I would say, on South Asia, you might find that Mr. Trump, like he was the last time, doesn't have that much interest in the rest of South Asia. He may not focus as much on some of the other countries in South Asia. This time, US troops are not in Afghanistan, so even that amount of interest in Pakistan may not be there, and Michael, I'm sure, will speak more about that. His interest in Bangladesh will be negative. He's already come out more or less criticizing the Bangladesh government on minority rights, and I understand he sees the current chief advisor as a sort of a democratic supporter. But in general, I think what we should expect is the expected, which is Mr. Trump talking about trade, what can you do for America, very much. Expect the unexpected, those tweets, his manner of speaking, his way of speaking in a private conversation with a leader, but then publicizing it the next day. And expect the sudden announcements. Even India, with its really good relationship with Trump in the last term, was given a rude shock when one morning he woke up and withdrew India's GSP status for exporters. So I think you should expect the expected, expect the unexpected, and possibly expect that private will now be public.
Right. Thank you so much, ma'am. Now I would like to pose my second question to Mr. Wang. Sir, you have previously focused on the Indo-Pacific strategy and how Sino-US relations evolved under Xi-Trump dynamic. Could you briefly discuss what the new Trump presidency could mean for China? What effect would it have on non-aligned periphery actors like Nepal that share close relations with both America and China?
Thank you. I think first, we have to recognize two versions of Indo-Pacific strategy conducted by the US government. One is invented by Donald Trump first term, and the second is practiced now by Biden administration. And so they share, the two versions share the same aim, that to counterattack the growing China's influence in this region, but they act in different ways. For example, for Biden administration, that they promoted by absorbing the third-party countries to join the supply chain and network of economics that led by the US while excluding China. So in this way. While for Donald Trump, we have reviewed the past 4 years that he made it in different way by trade war, the tariff war, and against every country. Because in Trump's way, that's every country, everybody in the world owes him a lot. Every country is a free rider, get free ride and get the profits by the expense of the US. And China is the most one. So we can see the difference that the tariff rate for China is the highest, but for others, the same. Even the most allies like Japan, like NATO countries, European EU, like South Korea, all allies like this in this way. So we can say, no one, so review the 4 years, no country really finally can get the substantial benefits from Trump's war even against China, because we must remember that it's America first, not Nepal first, India first, the old world first, global first. It's America first. must force everyone, maybe the high technology from China, from Taiwan province, back to the US. And the rednecks, they think maybe Bangladesh, maybe even other developing countries, you steal the job of the redneck guys like this. So let's come to your next question. Now, Trump is coming. Winter is coming. Voldemort is back. And so my answer for your question for non-aligned peripheral actors, my answer is all non-aligned countries get united. But I may disagree with you that periphery actor Nepal. No, I'm afraid I cannot agree with that. If you just put your eyes to the South Asian continent, you see maybe Nepal along the Himalayan mountain, yes, to the edge of this continent, subcontinent. But if your eyes cover the two dynamic engines, China, India, the East Asian world and the South Asian world together, Nepal is in the channel. Nepal is not peripheral, but it's the center. Can you tell me which city of China you think the most likely to Kathmandu? Which one? You guess?
Sorry.
My Shenzhen? Xinjiang, which city?
Probably to the south, Kashgar.
To Kashgar. In my view, maybe yes, in my view, it's Beijing. I'm serious. You see, Himalaya mountain, yes, Nepal, Kathmandu. And in China, Yan Mountain, Yanshan, and Beijing. You know, for thousands of years, Beijing used to be a citadel guarding the north gate of Great Wall for the Chinese empire against northern invasions, nomadic invasions. But for the past 800 years, it becomes the center, growing importance. Why? Because it's a center connecting three different people, different civilizations. The south, Chinese farmers, the Chinese one, and to the north, nomadic Mongolians, and to the east, Manchurians, the fishery and hunters like this. So only Beijing, it's a channel. It used to be the gate, the periphery, used to be a less developed one. But for the past 800 years, it's the capital of a larger China. So if you enlarge your eyes to the future world, Eastern and South Asian together, you will never think Nepal is the peripheral. No. So that's my personal idea. And so we come here, last month, I think something very interesting we need our attention. That last month, China, India get some dramatic reconciliation and get solution, a preliminary solution of the long-lasting border conflicts. So up to now, we cannot say, China, India will become brothers like 1950s. It's too early to say that, but we're really happy to know this, to witness this. And we ask further questions, why? Why this? Donald Trump. Come back to your question, yes. There are many answers, and yesterday we have talked about, and also my colleagues in China, we agree, thanks to Donald Trump, both India and China, we share the similar long history of suspended Asian civilizations. We will not, neither China nor India, will be used as a bulletin by Donald Trump to use China to counterattack India or force India to obedience, or either force India as a weapon to attack China and get benefit for his America first. These two dignity, these two great powers with the same dignity will not follow in this way. And these make responsible, so we can say that's a small step of the soldiers of two armies, but it may become a huge progress of two civilizations, two equally great civilizations. And this even show me insight that, remember, 70 years ago, China, India, as a co-editor, co-engine to promote, now we call it Global South, but the old name is what you mentioned, non-alignment movement, yes? This movement promote the world into the post-colonial era. So, but we say the split of Sino-India, that's a tragedy. for all the developing countries, for colonial countries, for global south. Now, we are happy to see something have been changed. And so in this new era, in this new kind of situation, we hope Nepal, don't think yourself as the periphery, but you are the channel. You can be the hub, you can be the center, and you are the forum. Yes, now we are the forum. Nepal, you invite a lot of experts from the US, from India, from China, from Nepal, from all the parts in this two East Asian and South Asian, and that will make the things different, make Nepal different, make the East and the South Asian continent different. That's my answer.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wang. That's very insightful. Now, moving on to Mr. Kugelman. I think my question is very similar, sir. The Indo-Pacific document was a significant development during President Trump's first term in office, with its free and open narrative and emphasizing the role of India in the region. As he commences his second term in office, what modifications in U.S. policy towards South Asia are anticipated?
So, thank you. It's an honor to be here, and I want to thank the Kantipur Conclave for having me. It's very risky to make predictions about something or someone so unpredictable, and President-elect Trump, we know, is very unpredictable, and as was noted, he's already made a lot of selections for his picks for his cabinet, and there's a lot of debate now about, a lot of these people are very, they're hardliners on China. What is that? That's significant, but if you look at precedent, we could be talking about people that he's picked that might not be in their jobs 6 years from now. So I think that context is important. I think that in terms of what to expect from his policy in South Asia, I think Suhasini got into this a bit. Look at what he might with U.S. relations with specific countries in the region, that is bilateral relations with countries around the region, I think there could be some notable changes. The relationship with India, I think, stands to improve in a big way. We know that there's pretty strong multi-partisan support in Washington for partnership with India, but Trump would be someone who could really for that relationship, mainly because some of the biggest tension points in the relationship in the Biden years, things like the Russia factor, the human rights issue, I think those will become less, those will not be the minefields that they've been just because of Trump's views on those issues. Bangladesh, I think, will probably be the relationship that could change the most, the U.S. relationship in South Asia that could change the most with Trump in office. I simply don't think that his administration would want to frame relations with Bangladesh in the way that they're framed now, and the way that they're framed since Sheikh Hasina was ousted several months back. It's a relationship that's now focused from a perspective on helping Bangladesh stabilize, reform, and so on. I think that Trump may think of that as something that's akin to nation building, something that he would not want to do. So I think that we could see the relationship with Bangladesh revert to how it was when he was previously in office, and then it was focused on things like trade, great power competition. Afghanistan, Afghanistan is a country that unfortunately in Washington has disappeared from the map. I do think that President-elect Trump might be willing to be more comfortable engaging with the Taliban compared to the Biden administration, wouldn't be as concerned as much about the rights record of the Taliban. However, if we want to look at how policy toward South Asia may play out, his strategy in South Asia, he will retain the Indo-Pacific policy, which, as noted, this was his policy to start with. And I'm quite confident that his administration will see the region through the lens of great power competition, rightly or wrongly. That is how the Biden administration has seen it, and that is how the first Trump administration saw it as well. So little policy 3. And the goal will be, indeed, to counter China. I mean, this is never articulated publicly by U.S. officials, but this is one of the bigger objectives. That will continue. And what we've seen in the Biden years and in the initial Trump years was this notion of trying to provide a better proposition, to quote what Donald Lu, a top State Department official for South Asia, has said. This idea of providing or offering public goods, infrastructure projects, investment projects that can be provided in a more equitable or transparent way than what China has provided. This is something that has been associated with the Biden administration, but it was the Trump administration that first used that model. And here I would cite a speech, and I'm not only citing it because it was made at the Wilson Center where I work, a speech that was made by Alice Wells, a top South Asia official in the first Trump administration. She laid out this vision of how the BRI is not a good thing because the investments aren't done well. And she was speaking specifically about how this played out in Pakistan with the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. But she made a pitch for more US investment in Pakistan that could be done more equitably with more transparency compared to CPEC and BRI. Very briefly, in the second Trump administration, we will see the Indo-Pacific strategy retained. I do think that some of the tactics and tools could change just a bit. I mean, we've seen over the 4 years of the Biden administration that clean energy, climate change, clean energy technology, provision. This has been one of the big priority public goods that have been emphasized through the Quad, the Indo-Pacific Quad, and also through the DFC, the Development Finance Corporation, which is really the main US government investment arm associated with the Indo-Pacific policy. A lot of focus on clean energy assistance, clean energy infrastructure. That, I think, might change in the Trump administration. I'll end with two quick comments. One, a wild card, and two, a black swan. What is a wild card? Something that's sort of unpredictable. The Russia issue. You know, I think that we talk so much about India-China competition, US-China competition in South Asia. We don't think enough about the Russia factor. And I think we've seen since the US, well, I'll describe it as the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Since that began several years ago, US-Russia competition has really picked up. And I think for the US, it's concerning that Russia really does not have any enemies, and it has quite a few friends in South Asia. And we'd seen soon after that war began, US officials trying to try to get the South Asian states, particularly the smaller South Asian states, I'm not talking about India here, trying to get them to be more sympathetic to the US position. I don't think we'll see that in the Trump administration. I know there's the conventional wisdom is that Trump's position on Russia is much more restrained than the Biden administration. Finally, a black swan. What is a black swan? This is something that's very difficult to predict. Or it's not something that would be predicted, but then when it happens, it has major implications across the board. Been talking about this a lot. A number of other analysts have been discussing this issue. What if President Trump, President-elect Trump, once he takes office, decided that he did not want to continue competition with China and that he would prefer to extend an olive branch and reach an understanding with President Xi, someone who he has often praised and complimented? This would not necessarily be a blow to US-India relations, even though it's the China factor and a shared interest in countering China that's driven US-India strategic partnership. I think there's enough to the US-India relationship, enough pathways, enough spheres of cooperation outside of strategic and China-related spaces, the relationship would not be impacted. But there would certainly be implications if that happens. And the final point I'll make is that the return of Trump might be good for the India-China relationship to an extent. If both New Delhi and Beijing are concerned about higher tariff risks, that might give them an incentive to create more commercial space to work more with each other, which they clearly are something that they already want to do. And I think that the border deal that was mentioned earlier could create even more diplomatic space for New Delhi and Beijing to expand their already robust commercial relationship.
Right, thank you so much. So many things have come out that I don't know if we'll get to cover, but I hope we'll get some questions from the floor as well later. But now turning to Professor Khadga. Sir, Nepal's foreign policy has been affected by the intensifying geopolitical competition in recent years. Is the increase in geopolitical competition, does it provide more opportunities or challenges for Nepal? Also, how do you assess Nepal's performance in handling its relations with larger powers in recent years?
Thank you, Kantipur Media Group. Thank you very much, Kantipur Media Group, for having me here this morning with great panelists from United States, China, and India. The topic sounds like very high-sounding. Turbulence, whether the questions raised by Apekshya will bring Nepal somewhere to the very closer to the turbulence of after the global geopolitical dynamics, especially after the Trump 2.0 re-elected election in the United States of America. And so that while talking about Nepal's repercussion of the global geopolitical dynamics and changing global power relation, how far Nepal could be affected or disaffected. Well, of course, indeed, because of our geopolitical complexities and Nepal's geopolitical situation, we often should be really much careful enough while dealing with the neighbors, even beyond the global powers, unmeasured powers and superpowers, even right from the very beginning of our nation-state building. It's not a new phenomenon for Nepal to be really much balanced for our national security, for our survival and prosperity. It is not new phenomena. However, in the recent years, global power relation has been changing very different way. Well, in South Asia, India is coming off one of the powerful economy in the global arena, and we do have a very close relationship for a long while, and geographically we have an open border. So in that sense, with the changing global power relation, especially when Trump became the second round president in the United States of America, what he has been saying in these days, and while looking off his past track record, where we can say that India-United States relation would be more engaged more closely than what they did in the past couple of years. Because of course, India is a part of American Indo-Pacific strategy. India is a part of American Quad. In the meantime, it seems like that President Trump and Modi has a very close personal relationship as well. In that sense, we do have a very intensive relation with India that somehow interchangeably affect our international affairs through that line. So in the meantime, in these, after 2030s, China's BRI policies has made kind of gradually America is one of the competitor. And United States of America, even during the Trump first tenure and then after Biden administration, they largely adopt cooperation, conflict, and confrontation. Three major policy framework with the United States, between China and the United States of America. So in that sense, when we became the BRI member, we signed in BRI 2017. However, even after signing the BRI, Nepal has so far could not make any significant engagement with China as per the BRI framework. But it seems like that Nepal is in the BRI loop. So that has been indicating, that has been giving one kind of message for the United States of America and India as well. Whether, even if, though we are not in all China's GSI, GCI or GDI, somehow we were in the GDI, Global Development Initiative, but we are yet to be engaged with the GCI and GSI. However, it has been portraying that Nepal is a BRI country on the one hand. On the other hand, United States of America and India has a very close relationship with, of course, beyond trade, they have a strategic partnership. In that sense, if we cannot really much careful, balanced foreign policy, diplomatic behaviors while dealing with the global powers, especially United States of America and both of our neighbors. So turbulence, the terminology which is used by Kantipur for these topics would be really much kind of compatible. At the end of the day, if we will not carefully balance foreign policy behaviors while dealing with United States of America, India, and China. So that is that we have to be really must think seriously. However, while analyzing our foreign policy behavior for last 1 decade, because of our political instability, our political leaders, most of the political leaders, they do change their foreign policy behavior when they are in power and then when they are not in power. So that has made serious challenge for Nepal. There are so many opportunities for Nepal because of our geopolitical situation. We can take advantage, maximize our advantages from China and India, even United States of America, so that we have signed in MCC. We are also in the BRI member. So through that, 2 instances, 2 illustrations, 2 cases, we can maximize their engagement with us and our engagement with them. However, if we cannot carefully handle these issues, probably the challenges will be there, which we may not able to handle, maybe in worse still situation. Because so far, somehow, we have been engaging, we have been adopting the non-aligned foreign policy so that we are yet to be any security alliances of any global power, so that we are still in safe side. And for me, we still should be, we always should remain as a non-aligned country, no matter even our neighbors, southern neighbors, India, even she would be a multi-aligned. If China would have a kind of like another security bloc, probably Nepal cannot afford to be engaged on that line, to remain balanced, non-aligned, to tackle challenges coming up through the changing global power relation and getting maximized benefit from especially our infrastructure development, our economic development, our bringing more FDI, even from United States of America, and of course both with China and India. So for me, how I can, what I can conclude here is that, well, changing global power relation has a very positive or very positive repercussion can be brought to Nepal if we can handle our foreign policy behavior balanced way with our both neighbors and United States of America. However, if we will tilt it towards one bloc in the name of any political ideology or any political benefit, probably that will be really much disaffect of changing global power relation and national security and our survival, even that would be in danger because of our foreign policy behavior. And for prosperity, economic development, we need to engage with the multiple international actors, of course, indeed, with the United States of America and China. And China and India are the closest neighbors of ours, and our neighborhood foreign policy should be the first priority of the country's national security and country's economic prosperity. So repercussion, affect and disaffect are coming up, and for that, to cope up those challenges, probably we need to institutionalize our foreign policy related institution. We do lack the think tanks which we can analyze the situation so that we can make a policy, and that we have seriously lacked in this country, so that the way how Kantipur Media Group or media has been taking these issues as one of the priority issues is really much appreciable. And we should continue this kind of discourses with our neighbors and the global powers, so that our more engagement will make our distance closer, and that largely will make us more beneficial in the days to come. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I would again like to move to Ms. Suhasini Haider. Ma'am, Delhi has imposed restrictions and refused to import power and goods from Chinese-linked projects. This effort to limit Kathmandu's engagement with Beijing has been criticized in Nepal, given that India and China themselves share very close relations. So do you think this policy will change if India-China relations improve in near future? Basically, where does the problem lie in Nepal-India relations?
The first problem is that things that are believed to be policy aren't necessarily policy. Sometimes what tends to happen is between any two border countries, there will be practices that seem to suggest that there is a central kind of approval for them. They may or may not have them. But in terms of policy, I don't think there is an Indian policy in some way to block or ban Nepali goods. Yes, there are concerns. I've spoken to many here who have concerns about sending goods over, particularly, I think, tea, cardamom, pharmaceuticals, household goods. I've reported about those concerns as well. But consistently, what we hear is that there is no policy, that it is essentially about India protecting its own interests, but also in terms of when you see the leaders come together, these are small issues. And my sense of India-Nepal relations, watching them over the years, has been that when these issues come to the fore, normally they are a symptom of a larger problem. They're a symptom of a greater strain in the relationship between the two, one which we should take seriously on both ends. I don't think there is a doubt about that. When you ask whether the India-China recent détente and India-China relation, in May this year, China actually surpassed all other countries, became India's biggest trading partner. So that's something India is conscious of. They're also conscious of what Dr. Khadga said, that there is a realization, there is a realism in Nepal today, that if India is an important neighbor, China is an important neighbor, but that not all the promises we had seen maybe some years ago have actually come through in terms of actual BRI projects, in terms of what has happened to some of the airports that was set up by China as well. So I don't see too much of a difference once India and China have had this kind of resolution in the India-Nepal equation. I think that has to be dealt with bilaterally. Of course, we have the ambassador to India here, so I'm really not as well placed to talk about how that will go forward. But I will make three very quick points. One, I think there is an issue in India when it comes to the image of Kathmandu in terms of the political instability. That you are consistently engaging with a new government here. It's not necessarily a fault, it is what happens. But if you look that in the last 2 years, we have seen 3 governments from all the top political parties come through. And so therefore there is an issue of engagement, because just as soon as you start something, as we did with a bilateral relationship, very successful one, a bilateral visit, very successful one by the Nepali Prime Minister last year. Now we see we are dealing with a new entity. I think the second is the Delhi problem. Neighborhood first is a policy, but as a journalist, I will say that we have been very critical of the gap between where India says neighborhood first, but what India does in many cases. In particular, I think since 2014, we have a government that is much more muscular, that believes in letting people know it will put India's interests very much up front. I think there is a realization even in Delhi that that doesn't always work. And it hasn't, whether it has been in Bangladesh, whether it has been in Maldives, a little bit in Nepal, Sri Lanka as well. We do also see a pushback. This is part of our neighborhood. This is part of our relations with each other, as if I shouldn't say family because that often gets misinterpreted, but we should behave as if we live in the same colony at least, in the same neighborhood. And that's my third point. I think there is a real issue with the fact that we have allowed regional organizations to let go. The rest of the world has turned completely regional. Globalization is a dirty word. You can't be totally protectionist in today's world. So therefore, the happy medium is that regional solution. The US, even Mr. Trump had a negotiation and had a USMCA. Mercosur in South America, the the Continental Free Trade Agreement. In this part of the region, there's RCEP, which none of us are a member of. In terms of economics, trade, prosperity of the people, we have let our regional relationship go by the wayside. I know that there are things like BIMSTEC and BBIN, but we know that they don't have the same traction. And we have all, it's not just India and Pakistan who are the chief culprits in this, but we have all as South Asians let down the idea that we have a tent in which we can come together and deal with many of these problems, trade, climate change, remittances. All of us send labor abroad. Why don't we get together and produce standards for ourselves that we will accept? Why don't we become a kind of energy group in terms of our consumption of energy. We've let this entire regional tent, as I said, go by the wayside. The last bit is just a personal kind of advice, and I think it's true of both Delhi and Kathmandu, which is we have relations that are historic, which are familial, but which are also so entrenched on both sides that it is a mistake for us to try and leave the relationship just to governments. We need to reach out to each other across many platforms. Journalists need to speak to each other, but also all parts of the polity on both sides need to continue to speak to each other. I feel here the communication and the dialogue in the last few years has become a little lacking. We've allowed the governments to take over the conversation between the two, and the journalists and the media covers then only the perspectives of those governments. So I leave it there. I mean, that's just a personal observation. But I do think that the India-Nepal relationship will remain. It will continue to be strong. It will continue to be there. But when there are irritants, when there are issues, they are a symptom of a larger problem that must be arrested immediately.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now I would like to move to Mr. Wang again. There's been a lot of talk of BRI. So BRI has driven China's foreign policy in the region. What lessons has the Chinese government learned from its implementation in South Asia so far? And what are your thoughts on BRI's slow progress in Nepal? For example, we became party to BRI back in 2017, but the protocol is yet to be endorsed.
Thank you for your productive question, which bring back my wonderful memory of Nepal 6 years ago. This time is my second time visiting Kathmandu, the beautiful city, and my first time visit here is December 2018 to attend a conference, also co-organized by the Nepalese Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Chinese Embassy here. The theme is about the SDG, UN SDG 2030 and the China-Nepal BRI cooperation. And at that time, 6 years ago, yes, we with great hope and enthusiastically talking about NIC, Nepal Indian China corridor, and the Nepal-Chinese high-speed railway building something. Yeah, but 6 years has passed. Yes, so I agree with you. So why the slow progress of China-Nepal BRI cooperation? How to explain that and how to make change of that? That's the essential problem in front of us. Yes, and my major is political science. So from the perspective of comparative political analysis, we must differentiate the constant from variables, and we control the variables, turn them into constant, and then we pay close to the essential, the substantial variables, and to find the true solution. Yes. So first, we can make comparatives here, reviewing the last 10 years BRI, the major cooperation countries, major projects in South and Southeast Asia. 5. Number 1, we can say Pakistan. Number 2, Indonesia. Number 3, Laos, Cambodia. Number 4, Malaysia. And number 5, we come back, Nepal. We make these 5 as major cases for our comparative analysis. Yes, they have similar starting point, but the ending totally different. For example, Pakistan, yes, that's the CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, flagship of China, all the BRI flagships, and achieved a lot. Yeah, and Indonesia, Joko, yes, we know the railway, high-speed railway from Jakarta to Bandar, yes, worked and even earn money now. So that has become a major political legacy and economic profits gift of the former Joko to his people now. Very good. And Laos, Cambodia, the railway work now. Chinese people are eating bananas and tropical fruits from Laos and Cambodia, and a lot of money, and they are happy and invite Chinese people come again to dig the whole of the canal. Yes, railway is not enough. They need more. So we start new projects. And for Malaysia, the story changed. And firstly, it's not very good. And then finally, we found it very, very wonderful, yes, because we say China, Malaysia signed a big the contract, yes, for railway and port building. But after regime change, the new administration come to power and accuse the former one, hey, you signed the contract with China, that's a bribe. That's against the Malaysian people's privilege and interest. But so this change postponed the China-Malaysia cooperation, BRI cooperation, for more than 1 year. You know, many Chinese companies, I have friends work there, they say they lose money every day, thousands, tens of thousands of US dollars. But has China say a single word to criticize Anwar? No. China has good temper. China stay calm and just wait. And finally, he realized that it's good. It's a good thing. So last week, he visited Beijing, talked with President Xi Jinping. They shake hands and they agree they need more projects. They began to design new plans to promote bilateral cooperation within the framework of BRI. So we see this from good news to tragedy and then come back. Yes, they realize the true national interest of the people and come back to the correct trade. That's with China. And then we come to the Nepal, yes. So there are three sources, levels of explanatory sources. One, we say the China's capability and willing, yes. The China's capability of infrastructure building and China's strong willing to build all this, we think maybe to a large extent it's a constant. China has strong willing to promote each one for them. No difference. Say we love Pakistan, we don't like Malaysia. No, China the same. Even many companies, they take the projects in different countries. My friend, last year he stayed a lot in Malaysia, and he may move to another country. Yes, for this, the same companies, the same capability, and then the second one is the host. Whether this host can get rid of the internal or external intervene or the turbulence, yes, geopolitical turbulence, and make a strong willing. That's quite important. Joko and in Pakistan, people also face that, but they successfully get rid of all these intervenes. And that is why China and Pakistan, we accumulated the very, very good high level of mutual trust, because the whole regime change, it's common, yes, because in democratic countries, parties, they have party politics, but in Pakistan, no politician, no party play the China card. I mean, so each time, their party politics, sometimes the struggle also very severe, but none of them play the China card. So Chinese people, we just stay far away, and we wait for a new prime minister, and we continue that. And they also never worry about so-called China interfere. No intervene. China no need to do that. And we hope that all other bilateral ties, we can mutually no intervene. Everybody take care of your domestic things. That's your business. What kind of party you want, that's decided by your people. And every other guys keep calm and just wait for a new president. And then we sign the new contract, promote the win-win together. So here. And the third level is the China's one, the host one, and the third party. Yeah. So here, I remember 6 years ago, the same pattern, very similar. The host, moderator, and the Chinese professor, Indian professor, Nepalese professor. The Nepalese asked me question. Hey, Wang, you described the China-Nepal railway speed. Oh, okay, very good. That can give us a big market. But do you know that what's the first dream of our Nepalese people? We need a port. We want linked with the sea. That's our first dream that we have negotiated for more than half century. Yes, we are a mountainous country. Yes, inland. We need to a port and connect with the world, maritime. We can sell goods to every country, everyone in the globe. And I told him that he asked me a question, and then he turned his face to the Indian professor, but without response. And then I told him, I have a little tip for you. Yes, my advice that you can try, Nepal, try to sign a contract with China about railway road project. And when the project accomplished, you can count the number of years, maybe 3 years, 5 years, maximum maybe 10 years. Your another neighbor will give you a new port, much better, larger, quite more advanced. And at that time, Nepalese professors, audience, they laugh and they talk with smile with me. And that Indian, no offense, because then the Indian professor just stayed
You're
near
asking
me.
them to play the China card.
Yeah. He turned a little bit angry, but very soon I used my words to explain and persuade him to agree that I dare to say this advice in public. It's not whisper. It's not conspiracy. I dare to say it in front of Nepalese people, Nepalese professor, Indian professor, because I think it's no conspiracy and it has no harm to Indian neither national interest nor national security. But maybe it has some negative impact to Indian, let's say, hegemon, or we use another word, it's regional influence to Nepal or other countries. If we take China, for example, we don't care. Nepal make friends of any other guys or make connections. You make railway with India and get a new port. We appreciate that much good. And then we can also make a railway. And then Tibet goods can also sell this, and certainly must get the permission from India and Nepal and pay the fees, certainly. So we think that the good relations with this, that all the big project like BRI, certainly it will change the geopolitical situation. So win-win plan for Nepal and China is not good enough. We need to get the applause, endorsement, yes, happiness of our neighbors. Get the win-win-win, 3 win together. That's good. So that is my advice for 6 years ago. But unfortunately, 6 years have passed for different elements, different reasons from internal, external. That, as you have mentioned, yeah, China, Nepal, BRI building. Still, we need new dynamics. And before we get generated new dynamics, we need mutual political trust, not only 2 countries, but among the other parties around it. That's better for all the participants in this region.
Right. Thank you so much. Now coming to you, Mr. Kugelman, in your recent articles, you noted how small South Asian states have used strategic autonomy to balance relations between India and China. Could you share some of your observations? Also, what considerations should small states keep in mind when pursuing strategic interaction?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a great question. It's not just India that exerts strategic autonomy, and I think that India has really been associated with that principle for a long time. But as we all know here, most capitals in South Asia have policies of strategic autonomy or something like it. And really, it's what the Global South on the whole aims to do, or many countries in the Global South. And if you look at the voting record of many of the Global South countries at the UN, on any resolution related to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, in many cases you'll have these countries that will abstain from resolutions that are backed by the US and its main allies that are very critical of Russia. And of course, the idea here, strategic autonomy, or whatever you want to call it, it's this idea of balancing ties with different blocks and camps and rival pairings to maintain flexibility. So very briefly, a few case studies. Sri Lanka, I think it's a very interesting case to discuss, using 2 examples, one, the war in the Middle East, and the other, India-China competition. So, since since the war began, Sri Lanka's government has announced a series of new aid pledges, aid commitments to the Palestinians. And it's been very critical of many countries in the West for their position on the Palestinians. It's accused the EU of having double standards. But at the same time, Sri Lanka does have a history of close relations with Israel going back to Sri Lanka's civil war for many years. And so in that regard, we've seen Sri Lankan officials being very visible about associating themselves in support with Israel. Sri Lankan diplomats in Israel have very publicly donated blood for Israelis. There's a deal that was signed some months back that enables Israel to hire Sri Lankan workers. And most strikingly, Sri Lanka participated in the US-led anti-Houthi military campaign, which is very striking, really the only country in South Asia that's been a part of that. So that's how it's balanced, the Israelis and the Palestinians. When it comes to China and India competition, Sri Lanka, of course, has courted Chinese infrastructure to a great degree. And the previous Sri Lankan president, Wickremesinghe, he had been very critical of some principles backed by India, including the Indo-Pacific strategy. He had described the Indo-Pacific as an artificial framework, which is quite a strong way to describe that. And we've also saw some weeks back, or a few months back, a deal involving the US DFC along with Gautam Adani to develop a port project in Sri Lanka. And this is something that the Biden administration sees this deal as a great example of how it aims to counter China in the region through non-military means. And again, this is a port project in Sri Lanka. Maldives is another really interesting example. Of course, there's a relatively new president there, Muizu, who won his campaign on a pledge to to expel the Indian military presence, which, let's be very clear, was never very large to start with, right? We're talking about several dozen troops who mainly were used to fly aircraft and helicopters for humanitarian activities. At any rate, we saw Maldives, once Muizu came to power, expel the Indian military presence, and it also signed a few new defense deals with China, which essentially have allowed those countries to work together more militarily. But at the same time, what else has he done, Muizu? He has also reasserted his friendship, Maldives' friendship with India, and he has really emphasized how India is a critical, he's used the term ally, but he's also emphasized how India is a critical partner when it comes to humanitarian and economic support. And what it seems to me is what Muizu is not doing, contrary to the observations of some analysts, is that he is trying to basically move into the Chinese camp. He's not doing that. I don't think that was ever his intention. What he seems to be wanting to do is better balance Maldives' relations with India and with China, with the main focus with India on non-military cooperation. With China, he's trying to scale up military cooperation a bit. We've already heard about how Nepal has balanced its relations with the US and China through BRI and through the much ballyhooed MCC grant. Bangladesh adapted an Indo-Pacific outlook during the latter months of the Sheikh Hasina era. And it's really interesting. It's not a strategy or a policy, it's an outlook. And what it does is it embodies a number of the principles of the US Indo-Pacific strategy. It makes explicit reference to free, open Indo-Pacific, but it also emphasizes a number of principles that China tends to emphasize in its foreign policy and international relations priorities, sovereignty, territoriality, and so on. So I think that Dhaka has also done a very admirable job of balancing ties with these different powers. If you play your cards right, strategic autonomy can be leveraged against intensifying great power competition. Going back to Sri Lanka, we know that India and China have jockeyed for influence there for quite some time. So when Sri Lanka was going through that horrible economic crisis some time back, both India and China were making pitches to provide economic financial support to Sri Lanka. And so one could argue that Sri Lanka actually got big economic benefits out of that great power competition because it got assistance from both of those countries. But all this said, the problem, the risk, is that with great power competition intensifying so much, it could put these non-aligned countries in the region in a tough spot. And we've had at least one case where you actually had a crisis, a foreign policy crisis, that a country had to face in this region because of great power competition, and that's Bangladesh. It was back in December of 2022, I think. You had a Russian ship that was trying to dock in Bangladesh. It had parts for a nuclear reactor in Bangladesh that's financed by the Russians. And so the U.S. Embassy in Dhaka had received word that this ship had done business for the Russian military, so it basically said to Dhaka, well, you really shouldn't let it dock here. It wouldn't be a good idea. And what's notable is that despite Bangladesh's good relationship with Moscow, wanting to maintain that relationship, it did not allow that Russian ship to dock. So that was a pretty notable challenge. Final word, you need agency to be able to be really successful with strategic autonomy. And here I think Pakistan is a case study of when it really can't work. I mean, it wants to balance its ties with the West and with the non-West, and it does that to an extent, but it's too heavily dependent on Western donors to be able to veer as far from the West as it would like in some cases. So yeah, I'll wrap there.
Right, thank you so much. So the last question is for Khadga, sir. Sir, as you know, we're in a time constraint, but so you've already reflected on this, but so what should be Nepal's strategy in the future to enhance its
thank you very
policy?
much once again. I will a couple of ideas, especially despite protecting the national interest, primary national interest of Nepal, which has spelled out by our constitution in 2050 constitution. I think we have to learn quite a lot from our neighbors. For example, India and China are engaging in the border dispute for a long while. Despite having very contentious border disputes, they are seriously engaging in trade relation for one of the exemplary trade relations. So that we need to be for me, Nepal should be always remain as a truly non-aligned, should not be engaged with any security alliances in any pretension. That's the very clear foreign policy consensus should be made inside the home. Due to the political disputes and political instability and political leaders, political actors, and we intellectual media and non-state actors, we do create the narratives in one way or another way. That really I dislike, because we are creating narratives one with another neighbors and global powers inside the home. I think that we need to be somehow, intellectual debates is needed, but there are so many narratives creating, which seems like, for example, that may eventually against the national interest of this country. We need we should have a truly non-aligned foreign policy. We should believe on our relation with no matter which size and which global powerhouses, should be based on the sovereign equality. And Nepal should focus on multilateralism, which Nepal started in 1960, because multilateralism, regionalism is really much beneficial for small powers like Nepal, because we cannot focus on bilateralism, we can focus on populism, where we need to dialogue, we need to deal with any global powers and regional powers one-to-one. While dealing with one-to-one, probably being a small powers, small economy,